Democratic Congressman Eugene Vindman of Virginia. He is a member of the House Armed Services and Agricultural Committees. Congressman, thank you for your time. First, I want to get your take on these talks between the U.S. and Russia in Saudi Arabia. Is it a mistake not to have Ukraine present for these talks?
Well, first of all, thank you, Paula, for having me tonight. These talks with Russia start with a very weak bargaining position. Think about what's happened last week. The U.S., the new Secretary of Defense, has agreed that Russian territorial gains should be, the Russians should be able to keep parts of that, that Ukraine should not be in NATO. Before that, Ukraine has lost aid in rebuilding of its infrastructure through USAID programs. So this is about the weakest starting position for peace talks that you can imagine. This is all before the first sides meet. So I think it's a very weak starting position. If I were to give the administration any credit at all, maybe they're looking at having sequential talks, but they're starting from a weak position.
And we're getting a lot of different messages about what exactly Ukraine's role will be going forward. Ukraine says it was not informed about these talks in Saudi Arabia. Trump says they will be involved. And then his special envoy, General Keith Kellogg, announced dual talks will be taking place in Kyiv. Is this a smart strategy?
No, it's not a smart strategy. Look, different parts of the administration, General Kellogg says one thing, the Secretary of Defense says another thing. J.D. Vance, Vice President, says another thing. So there's no way to tell where this administration actually stands on the talks. And, you know, the idea of the U.S. and Russia having these talks without participation from the EU and Ukraine is nonsensical. The U.S. is at best tangentially involved. The U.S. has provided some material support, some monetary support, and that's about it. It's not like we're directly involved in the conflict like we were in Vietnam or North Korea. So I don't know what the administration can possibly agree with Russia that does not involve Ukraine coming to the bargaining table.
Well, this week, Vice President J.D. Vance told the Wall Street Journal that the U.S. has economic and military leverage against Russia. What do you make of those comments? I mean, what do you think that leverage looks like?
Well, again, I think we start from a position where the U.S. has in some ways legitimized some of the gains. I think the president last week said that, you know, the loss of Russian, several 100,000 Russian forces has sort of bought them some of the territorial gains that they've made. It's nonsensical statements. It's statements that no president of the United States should ever be making. And it's frankly completely and totally unacceptable position to start with.
All right, let's turn to the Middle East. Israel vowing to, quote, finish the job against Iran with help from the U.S. According to our sources, both the Biden and Trump administrations received intelligence that Israel would likely attempt to strike facilities key to Iran's nuclear program this year. Does that run counter to the Trump administration's desire for peace in the Middle East?
Well, 100%. This administration has been promising to keep us out of wars around the world in the Middle East. And, you know, I agree that Iran is a major destabilizing force in the Middle East and around the world. They're a state sponsor of terror. They support the Houthis that are blocking major shipping channels. So the Iranian problem must be dealt with in some form or fashion. But I have not seen anything to indicate that there is a Iranian nuclear breakout. That would be something that could potentially warrant a response from the U.S. and Israel. Until I see something like that, until that is presented to the American people, this idea of the U.S. entering into a conflict in the Middle East, another one, is totally unacceptable.
Now, back here at home, of course, as you know, thousands of federal workers are at risk of losing their jobs as Elon Musk and DOGE make their way through key agencies. And the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, he says he will welcome Musk and DOGE at the Pentagon very soon to, quote, find billions of dollars to save. Have you heard anything about what DOGE could do inside the Pentagon?
Well, look, earlier this week, a Republican senator said that the secretary made a rookie mistake. And there is no such thing as rookie mistakes for the Secretary of Defense of the United States. There's no warm up for an administration. And we've already seen that this DOGE, I call it the Department of Government Inefficiencies, is causing a reign of terror, chaos across the federal government. Just this week, they released classified information about a U.S. intelligence agency. They have access to the American people's personal information, bank accounts, and things like that they're frankly not entitled to. And so I have a major concern about them going into Department of Defense and futzing around with the internal systems there in U.S. national security.
And DOGE is reportedly also targeting the Department of Agriculture. The agency leader says layoffs are coming. Your state plays a big role in our nation's production of agricultural products. So as a member of the Agricultural Committee, are you hearing anything about the impact we could see at that agency?
Well, look, this administration and these executive orders seem to be just actually executing a policy, then thinking about it, and then walking it back. We saw an example of that this week where one of their policies related to federal government employees is walked back after I introduced a bill that was bipartisan and that had generated a lot of pressure on administration. And so move fast and break things may be a way for, tech bros to manage things in Silicon Valley, but it's no way to run government because unlike in private industry, you may lose business, but in government, people's lives are at stake. And when it comes to agriculture, I've heard from farmers around my district that are very concerned that currently are losing or have had programs that are supported by USDA frozen. USAID purchases a great deal of grain and products from American farmers. All of that has put them in jeopardy, and social media is filled with reports of folks that were Trump supporters, and I've gotten calls from folks like that in my office that have been Trump supporters and are getting more than they bargained for.
Now, you, along with Congressman Rob Wittman, introduced legislation pushing President Trump to allow federal workers who are married to military members and foreign service members to continue to work from home. Now, this is after the White House announced a new policy requiring all government employees to return to the office. Can you explain why this is such an important issue for you?
Look, I spent 25 years in the United States Army, so I served with my brothers and sisters in uniform and patriotic families around the country and around the world. And so I know the hardship that they go through. I know how hard it is for them to uproot every couple of years and try to secure a job. And so when it pertains to a federal government job and you have a spouse who actually called into my office, said, this new executive order announced and then thought through only on the back end would have her drive 200 miles round trip from one end of my district to Washington, D.C. It would have resulted in her having to quit her job, her husband having to leave the military, or a 200-mile round trip. And so I moved fast with my colleagues on the Republican Party. This is a bipartisan issue. Supporting patriotic American families is a bipartisan issue. And so we drafted a piece of legislation that put pressure on the administration in addition to calls and letters that went out to the administration. And we've seen this administration actually respond to pressure. They've backpedaled before, and they did it again on this issue, which they issued an exemption to active duty military spouses that affected thousands of spouses around the country and around the world. And I see it as a major victory, and I feel great about the fact that we're helping patriotic American families.
Now, before I let you go, I have to ask you about the government funding deadline. It's coming up in less than a month. Are you planning to work with Republicans to ensure there's no government shutdown, or will that all be up to the GOP to avoid?
Look, the GOP is the party in power. The House of Representatives is a majoritarian institution, which means that the majority controls the House. We've seen chaos. We've seen how disjointed they are. They have a caucus that is filled with radicals. And so I suspect they're going to have to work with Democrats. And I've already demonstrated that I'm a moderate bipartisan member. I'm going to look for areas where I can work with Republicans on to help my constituents, help the American people. But I'm certainly going to hold the line with my Democratic colleagues to make sure that our priorities are not cut, and that the administration actually follows the law and follows the Constitution. And when we pass a funding bill, that they actually execute that funding bill.
Congressman Eugene Vindman, thank you.